right, so today we are going to look at Sonnet 116. This is going to start our practice for poetry. And tomorrow you guys are going to do the same activity but with a different sonnet. But I want to go in and explain how you go about doing this graphic organizer and analyzing these poems. Okay, so you've hopefully already gone through the sonnet prezi, and you know that this is not set up in the proper stanzas. So we need to go ahead and make sure we carve out our 3 quatrains and our couplet. So we need to count 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to put a line underneath there, and we're going to label that Q1. Okay, all right, then we're going to come down 1, 2, 3, 4, put a line underneath there, and this is going to be Q2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, a line there, and that is Q3 for quatrain 3, and then 1, 2, this is our couplet, so we'll just put a C there. Okay, you guys will not have paper copies of this, so you will not have to do that necessarily, but if you ever do go back to doing paper copies, hopefully you will, you'll know how to do this, okay? You also know that we can go ahead and make out our rhyming pattern. Sonnets always have the same rhyme pattern, but if you're not familiar with how to find that, you look at the last word of the line and you see if it matches up and rhymes with the following line or any of the other following lines. Okay, so our first one is mines. The first line always is going to get an A, okay? So does mines rhyme with love? No. So you're going to go to the next letter in the alphabet, and that's going to be a B. Okay, mines rhymes with fines, so we give that an A. Remove is supposed to rhyme with love if you pronounce it in the right way, so that's going to get a B. Okay, mark does not rhyme with mines or love, so it's going to get a C. Okay, shaken doesn't rhyme with mark, love, or mines, so it gets a D. Okay, bark rhymes with mark, so it gets a C. And taken rhymes with shaken, so it gets a D. Okay, you can kind of see the pattern already. Cheeks doesn't rhyme with anything up above, so it gets an E. Come, again, does not rhyme with anything above, so it gets an F. Weeks rhymes with cheeks, it gets an E. Doom rhymes, if you pronounce it, again, in the right way, it's supposed to rhyme with come, so it gets an F. And then proved and loved rhyme with each other, but they don't rhyme with anything up above, so they get a G and a G, okay? This is the rhyme scheme of all Shakespearean sonnets, so you will automatically know that, but it just helps if you practice finding rhyme scheme, if there is one. Okay, so again, if you read over the Shakespearean sonnet PowerPoint, then you know that each one of these quatrains and the couplet also follow a pattern. The first quatrain is always going to be where the theme or the main metaphor is established, okay? The second quatrain is always going to be where the theme or metaphor is extended, okay? So they're going to talk about it in a different manner, or maybe they're going to talk about it in the same manner, but just in a more explicit way. The third quatrain is going to be where a twist is introduced, the peripetia or the volta, as it's also known. But it's also contradicted sometimes with a but, okay? And then the couplet is always going to be sort of the summary, okay? Just talking again about what it's already talked about up above, okay? So let's go and read through this. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Okay, so we're assuming we're talking about love. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Okay, so here we're talking about how love isn't true love if it ever changes or is removed, okay? So saying sort of like love is unshakable, okay? So we can say our theme / metaphor equals love is unshakable, okay? Or you can also say forever, okay? Then we're going to go into the next quatrain. We know that it's going to be something similar to this, maybe a little bit different, maybe the opposite, but it's going to still be talking about sort of love as the unshakable forever type of thing. Okay, so it says, "Oh no, it is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth unknown, although his height be taken." Okay, so it is an ever-fixed mark, and that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth unknown, although his height be taken. So back to this idea of love as unshakable, okay? It's an ever-fixed mark. And if it wanders, then it's not true, okay? So again, love is unshakable, okay? And then we can kind of underline this and underline this. This is kind of our proof of that love is unshakable idea. Okay, so quatrain 3, this is where our turn is supposed to happen, our twist. "Love's not time's full, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom." Okay, so time's full. Love is not time's full, with his bending sickle's compass come. It alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. So if we're thinking about time, we're coming back to this idea that love is forever, and it's not going to die when the person dies. It's going to continue on, okay? So love is true only if it stands the test of time. And if you wanted to, you could put time as capital Time because they do it right here. So basically saying our little turn that's happening here is only true love exists if it lasts past death, right? So it's saying that you can believe that you're in love, but only if it goes on forever is it true love, okay? And then that last little couplet, "If this be error and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved." Basically saying that if I'm in error, then maybe I have never actually been in love. Maybe I don't know. Or if you don't believe me, maybe you've never been in love. Okay? So thinking about this, okay? Now we're going to translate that to here, okay? Which is what you guys are going to be working on digitally. And this is the Analyzing Poem TPcast, okay? So up at the top, and I'm going to move my poem over to the side. You guys have it hopefully in front of you. What you guys are going to do is we're going to start simply right here. So our sonnet that we are doing is Sonnet 116, also known as Let Me Not to the Marriage of True, and I didn't do that very good, minds. Okay, and then you'll put your name right here. Okay, so let's look at our first little section, title. It's always good to look at the title of a poem to get an idea of where we're sort of going this one's a little bit more complicated because generally sonnets are just known by their number and the first line, and sometimes the first line doesn't give away a whole lot. But if we look a little bit closer, maybe we can find something. So let me not to the marriage of true minds. Okay, so we have this idea of marriage. Okay, and when we think of marriage, we usually think of love, we think of couples, we think of vows, all those kind of good things. And then true minds, what might that mean? If we think about true minds, maybe we're thinking of people who are logical, maybe who are open to others' views. So what do these two maybe have together? So maybe we're talking about different ideas of love. So if we connect these together, so we can say the connection maybe is talking about different views of love. Make some kind of guess, okay? You have this little box over here that gives you some kind of ideas of maybe what you can write about when it comes to the title. So connotation, that's whether a word seems positive or if it's a negative word, or if it doesn't maybe have one of those charges. So for instance, marriage. Marriage is generally a positive word, but sometimes it can be associated with divorce, right, which makes it negative. So you have to sort of connect and make your own assumptions about, what emotional charge does the word hold, and it can be different depending on your view. True minds, it leads more towards maybe the neutral zone. Maybe you could consider it positive because it's maybe something, when you think of true, that's a good association. That's one thing to consider. Punctuation, notable punctuation, we don't really have any of that in here, so we can kind of just skip over that one. Is there any indication of tone? So how the speaker is feeling. Let me not to the marriage of true minds. Maybe we could say that the tone is maybe resistant. Let me not to the marriage of true minds. Because he doesn't want to be connected to this idea of marriage of true minds. We could also say maybe that it is, you could always go the other way, hopeful, that he is able to find a new way of thinking. Think about tone, okay? What is the author or the speaker feeling? Do we learn anything about the speaker? Well, it's first person, but we don't know if it's male or female. We don't know how old they are, but we do know that it is written in first person. Okay, and when we have a poem that's written in first person, generally we are talking about the poet themselves. Not always, but in general. So that actually can lead us down here to the paraphrase section. What do we know about the speaker of the poem? We know that it is written in first person point of view, because they say me, okay? And we can assume it is Shakespeare himself, right? We can go ahead and make that assumption because of the first person, all right? Notice I wrote these in sentence format, okay? They're not just one word, they're a whole sentence. And I tried to include reference to something from the text, some kind of textual evidence to support what I'm saying, okay? So I assume that I know that it is written in first person point of view because they use the word me here. And I'm going to assume that it's Shakespeare himself because, and I didn't write this, which I should, because it is written in first person. first person point of view. Now, I don't mind if you use the shortened version of point of view. Things like that don't bother me. But you should try to use complete sentences as much as possible, okay? And support what you're saying with evidence from the text, a quote, or just a reference to a part, okay? What is the setting? Okay, so we have to go back into our poem and look. We don't really have a indication of what the setting is, but because of the language used, and I'm going to set this poem back over here for a second, because of the language used, we know that it is probably coming from an older time period, right? Because we don't use words like tempests anymore necessarily. We don't use the word sickle much anymore. And this spelling of proved and loved is very outdated, right? So we can make an assumption that this is written or taking place in an age that is way past. This is an old poem. So we can put that there. We can say no indication of place. But I assume it is written it was written or takes place in an older time period. Because of the old language, outdated, we'll say old, outdated language, right? And it's okay that I made an assumption because I supported it with something from the text, right? I looked at the language that was used. I noticed that it's not language that we use anymore. So I'm going to assume that it's either it was written in an older time period or it takes place in an older time period and they're trying to mimic the dialect used, okay? That's fine. You can do that. If I wanted to go a step further, I could say the outdated language, specifically the spelling of loved or the use of the word tempests. I could go that extra step. I just don't have room right here. But it's always good for you guys to go that extra step, okay? And then 3 points, identify what's happening in the poem. I'll leave that to you guys, okay? Because that's just providing a summary. Try to write in a complete sentence. If you can't, that's okay with this section right here. All right, connotation. So we talked a little bit about that up here, up in this section right here. But are there any words, specifically, we're talking about diction here, and diction is specific word choice, okay? So words that really stick out to you as a choice by the poet or by the author in general. So are there any words in here that really stick out? I think, and it can be phrases as well. Ever fixed mark, I think is a good one. So I'm going to put that over here. Ever fixed mark or ever fixed mark, whatever, however you want to pronounce it, it's fine. And then let's see, another one. Times full, I think, is a good one. And that's, if we think about the connotation of that, it is maybe supposed to be negative because when we think of full, we think of something negative. Let's see, what's another good one? Doom. Doom is a good one. That's a very negative word, right? When we think of doom, we think of things falling apart. So that's a very specific word. And then error. I think error is another good one. Okay. And when we think about the overall connotation, okay, so this section right here, it says describe the connotation of the words. When we think of the overall connotation of this, times, full, doom, and error are all somewhat negative, right? Yours might look a little different. Maybe you picked out instead marriage, love, rosy lips and cheeks, the more positive things. If that's the case, that's totally fine. Your list may look completely different than mine, but mine, for the most part, seems to be more negative, Okay, so I would say the overall connotation, okay, of the chosen words appears more negative. Okay, and like I said, yours may be more positive, it may be more neutral. That's okay. What stands out to you it's totally okay if it's what is different than what stands out to me. What's important is this section right here, and I've kind of written over it, and I'm sorry. It says, what is the impact on the text? Okay, so when we're talking about, when it says, what is the impact on the text, we're going back to this section. So what is the impact of either the diction or the connotation? And you'll notice this little box that says impact verbs. These are words that if you are taking your NCFE or your EOG, your EOC, these are words that are going to show up in your questions, okay? So it's good to practice using these words when you're making an analysis. So for instance, since I have mostly negative words, I can go back and associate that with my belief that this maybe is a poem about love, okay? Because it might be unexpected that there's a lot of negative words being used in a poem about love. So I might say that the use of mostly negative words alters the reader's assumption about the poem's ideas of love, right? Because I thought that it was going to be an overly lovey-dovey poem, but because of the negative words that I picked out, it changed what I thought. It changed my assumption about the ideas of love, okay? So just trying to figure out how to speak about what the category that you're on, how to speak about that category in that diction or, whatever it is, and use one of those impact verbs. If you would like, and I would love it if you did, bold or underline the impact verb that you use, okay? That would be really great. Because it just shows me that you're giving that a really good shot. If you're not great at the impact sentences, the use of the impact verbs right off, that's okay. We'll practice more with that. But be thinking about what that category does to you as the reader, or does to the poem overall. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about impact. How does it affect you, or how does it affect the poem, okay? Or whatever text it is that we're reading. Okay. So the second page is starting off with attitude, aka tone. So 3 tone words that we can use to describe what's going on in a text. Okay, so we can say something like dedicated, because he is dedicated, or the poet is dedicated to their idea of love. We can say that it is maybe a bit stubborn, because they don't believe that if you agree with them, then they think that you haven't been in love, and they're not willing to budge on that idea, okay? And then maybe we can also say that it's a bit optimistic, right, about what love really is, right? Because is love really this idea of forever, okay? Or can love exist in a specific time? So I think optimistic maybe is a good word for that. Okay, so then quotes that support this attitude or tone. I have 3 somewhat different tone words. So I can focus on which one I think maybe is the most dominant, and then I can put that here. Or I could find a quote that goes with all three. If they're all very similar, then you can just put one quote for all three. I'm going to focus on this optimistic right here. And I'm going to put the quote, so I'm going to indicate that I'm talking about optimism here. So optimistic. And then I'm going to put the quote. This idea that it is never shaken, that is an ever fixed mark. Okay, so, and I'm gonna put the ... right there because I'm coming in at the middle of a quote, okay, because I'm not gonna put the oh no part, so I put the ... It is an ever fixed mark, and because we're jumping to a new line, we indicate that with a backslash, okay? So it is an ever fixed mark that, sorry, I need to capitalize that, that looks on tempests and is never shaken, okay? And I'm going to put the line number. So if I look at the line number, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, lines 5 and 6. And I'm going to indicate that 5 through 6. Okay? Hopefully that's pretty easy. If you get stuck on tone words, just I recommend Googling lists of tone words. There's tons out there to help you with that. But remember, when we're talking about tone, we're talking about how the author or the speaker is feeling, okay? So you're looking for emotion-based words. Okay, so then impact of the text when we're talking about tone. So this tone, I focused on optimism. How does that impact the text or impact the reader? I'm going to focus on how it impacts me. So I would say that the optimistic tone of the speaker advances the reader's own existing feelings of love. Just to put something that relates to maybe how I already feel or maybe how you already feel about love. If you believe that love is a forever kind of thing, then it advances, it pushes forward your own feelings of love. Maybe if you think that you are a little bit more pessimistic about love, maybe it contributes to your belief that love is something changeable, right? Maybe it just further pushed you to believe that love maybe isn't something that goes on forever, right? So try to, again, work that impact verb into your impact, okay? How does it impact you or impact the text? Okay, so shift, the category for shift. And what we're talking about when we're talking about shift is any change in the poem, okay? So did we have an overall change? The only one that I could say that may exist for this, because it pretty much talks about this idea of unshakable love. The only change that maybe you could say is that and I really don't think that there is one. I do not think that there's a change. So when we talk about any shifts in the poem, and I'll come back to this section right here in a second, but are there any shifts in the poem? And if there aren't, that's fine. Just put no shifts in the poem, okay? If there were, these are the three things that I usually try to focus on. Time, okay? Do we shift from maybe one period to the next? Is there a shift in tone? How they're talking about something? I really don't feel like there was, so I just put no shifts. Or is there a shift in content? Is there a shift in what they're talking about? Those are three things that you want to focus on. So if there were, if, for instance, he went from really optimistic to really, really pessimistic, where he's hopeful about love versus he's very down on love, then I would have put the poem shifts from a very hopeful tone to one that is a bit more down on the subject of love, right? Complete sentence. Tell me specifically what that shift is. And if you want, tell me which stanza or which line the shift happens. That's a really great idea. Okay, so what is the stanza structure of the poem? This is a 4-stanza poem that specifically has 14 lines, because all sonnets have 14 lines, with what we call an A-B structure, other than the GG, right? And it has 3 quatrains and 1 couplet. You don't have to go quite into that much detail for other types of poems, but we already know the general stanza structure of a sonnet because it doesn't change. Okay, so impact on the text. For this, no shift in a poem usually indicates that the poet is very strong about what they believe or what they're talking about in the poem. Okay, they believe very strongly in what they're saying. So I would write something along the lines of that for that square right there. Okay? And then theme. This one we've already kind of talked about. So I'm going to let you guys focus on this one when you fill it out. But theme statement, this is what I want you to focus on right here. Theme statement. Theme is not one word, okay? Topics and subjects are one word. Theme is based off the topic and subjects, but it is a whole sentence, okay? If you write love, that's a topic, that's a subject. When you're thinking of a theme, what are they saying about love, okay? We've already kind of talked about it, so be mindful. But if you put down one word, that's a topic or subject, okay? Think about what are they saying about that one word, okay? So love, for instance, what are they saying about love? That's the theme statement. Hashtags, you guys can have fun with this. Think of it sort of like the topic subject idea. Don't make it inappropriate, okay, because it's still a school assignment. But have fun with those, right? I love hashtags, as you know. Okay, that is all. And I appreciate you guys following along. I know that was probably a lot. But if you have any questions on this, just send me an email, okay?